Thank you for joining us again at Yeti at Large. Today, Kari Lake's election announcement.
Hi, and welcome to Yeti at Large. This is a channel focused on making the most out of what you have, no matter where you're at. Thanks for tuning in and helping out.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This is a full 24 hours after the Senate announcement. I had to take that much time to really get my mind around the experience and many of the observations that I had. Keep in mind, I'm offering no opinions here. This isn't political punditry. This is just raw journalistic observation. Many of the questions that I'm going to pose here in this short segment and analysis of the Senate race announcement from candidate Lake are directly fielded from the crowd. I did spend a good amount of time at the conclusion of the event speaking with people milling about in the street and heading back to the parking lot areas, and I fielded many of these questions that I'm going to present to you. But I wanted to do a quick overview and talk a little bit about the event. It was very interesting. I actually applied for media credentials, received them. I've interviewed the candidate before in less formal settings at political rallies, where there was a very organic, contagious energy that was very much a fun thing to be a part of. The first thing I've noticed is the response in the request for the media credentials and the preparations and announcements for this event have a lot more of polish on them, a lot more of the evolution of a political candidacy and a political corporate entity, if you will. The first thing I noticed was the location selected for this event at the global headquarters of Jet Set magazine in Scottsdale, Arizona. Now, if you look at these links here, Jet Set's self-proclaimed title is that they serve the upper 1%, the ultra affluent of society, yachts, private jets, mansions, resort islands. And that's a hard thing to compare and to contrast when you have a candidate who's talking about Biden inflation, and several people walking out of the event took note of that and stated that they thought it was a very poor optic to be at this ultra high luxury organization when the candidate's talking about $4 a gas, Biden inflation, and average folks trying to make ends meet. So as we assembled there, the press was contained on these risers approximately 85 feet from the stage. There was no pit towards the front where photographers could get a good close-up shot. Organized in a specific area and not to leave that area, I had emailed the campaign and requested to move about the crowd and not occupy riser space. However, I was instructed to the top level of the risers in the farthest corner. There was no access to bathrooms, there was no emergency exits, and at all times there was 3 or 4 staffers in a line separating the press from the crowd, preventing members of the press from mixing. As I settled in on the risers, you can see I made a couple of early observations. Forgive the audio. So there's no doubt that this announcement will bring rhetoric, discord, attacks, accusations, and political chatter. I would challenge people to cut through all that and focus on principle-centered discourse. Remember, elected officials, short of the entire legislative body, don't make the law. They have to follow it. And if they want it changed, that's the place to do it. So when people are complaining about this, that, or the other thing, or name-calling, try to filter that out. As this campaign's footprint grows and is now considering what looks to be a run in the legislative body, you can see that the size and the velocity at which the coverage, the reporting, it seems to go with. As the sun began to settle and we got closer to the event, I noticed that the crowd size was a fraction of the previous crowds that I had witnessed. Other events I'd been to had been overflow, standing room only, where many people didn't get inside, but they occupied the lawns and the spaces outside. This event had anticipated that and had a couple of jumbotrons in the parking lot, but the venue did not fill up. By best estimates, I counted somewhere between 325, 420 attendees, minus staff, volunteers, and media. As the event began, Brandy Barclay, a self-proclaimed prayer warrior, gave the invocation. And then there was a rousing version of the national anthem. The singers did a fantastic job and invited the whole crowd to sing. There was a member of the Arizona Rangers that brought out a flag that flew over the USS Enterprise, CVN 65, and they allowed the crowd in the front of the room to unfurl the flag and hold it overhead while they played America the Beautiful, I believe it was. Very scary moment with audience participation with a venerated object. You can't let the flag touch the ground. It would be inappropriate, and it was kind of an awkward moment. I don't know if it went off like they were really hoping. And again, there seemed to be a clear distinction between the front of the room, the VIPs, and those all-access people, and just about everybody else. Abe Hamadeh, candidate for Attorney General, came out and made some brief remarks to warm up the crowd, and started the trend of saying that we really missed you. And the irony was, we haven't gone anywhere as John Q. taxpayer, the voting public. It was the officials that had been gone, and there was no acknowledgement of that. Instead, they tried to create this absence makes the heart grow fonder moment. It did come off, again, as highly scripted, highly structured, formulaic, if you will. And I'm not trying to be harsh or negative here. These are just raw observations. As Abe finished up, they did a new bump roll of the candidates' information, and there was a lot of interesting clips and pieces in there, some of it positive from the candidate, and some of it the negative attacks from some of the media outlets. The candidate came on and began giving some remarks, and instantly there was some really obvious moves to the center. The candidate was wearing a blue shirt, the drapes were blue, which coincided with the call for ecumenics and unity, that they're all Americans, there's only one gas pump, not a gas pump for Democrats and Republicans. But then it was coupled with some pretty typical mudslinging Tammany Hall style attacks on individual candidates and party platforms and other party donors, which several people in the audience commented walking out that they thought it was hard to reconcile that candidate Lake was talking about the gentle persuasion and the unifying of Ronald Reagan, but then would go directly into these ad hominem attacks, and they couldn't get their mind quite around it. But then there was a call for unity. You could follow the teachings of Jiminy Cricket in that, or you could listen to my communication style video talking about the power of please and thank you and speaking from the positive. You can still very clearly and concisely make a point that your opponent's policies and platform are flawed and bad policy by talking about facts and specifics, and then run on your record of accomplishments or your party's platform of accomplishment. I said once in a video that a salesman can't sell anybody anything, just like a candidate can't convince you to vote for them by how negative or how poorly their opposition is performing. All you can continue to do is add value until a decision is made to purchase or that somebody chooses to vote for you because of the positives. I know there's a lot of negative mudslinging, and I know that there's a lot of polls that say that work, but it doesn't work for a lot of people that I spoke to last night. There was a solid endorsement from President Trump.
And when I'm back in the White House, I need strong fighters like Kari in the Senate. She is a fighter, she's strong, and she's good. She's got a great heart, by the way.
There was a visit from a mother who lost a son to fentanyl, and the ongoing call to end the fentanyl crisis. Having worked in public safety and dealt with fentanyl when this crisis began and bloomed to a full roar, I'm a strong believer in controlling the flow of illegal drugs to prevent fentanyl. But it was an awkward moment. This speech, short of the announcement for the run for Senate, ran on much, much longer than I think a lot of people were prepared for. And I noticed at about the 40-minute mark, there was a steady stream of traffic leaving the event. And I didn't see a lot of reaction from the staff gauging that and reading the room. And instead, the speech really came across as uncharacteristically disjointed and rambling. It's almost like it wasn't as rehearsed and prepared, potentially, as we're used to with such a polished public speaker. As it wound down and the remarks were over, the campaign was never clear if there was going to be a Q&A, and it's been the hallmark of their events previously is that unfettered access to ask real questions of the candidate. You can see here I attempted to approach and ask if there was going to be a Q&A.
Is there going to be a Q&A? I do not think so. No, they're not gaggling. There's no mention of it. Yeah, they're not gaggling. I think they're going to gaggle.
I wasn't told definitively that there wasn't going to be. It was kind of a meandering answer. But again, that wall of staffers between the press and the candidate continued. I did notice that Real America's Voice, again, had that unfettered access to the VIP area. So I moved over there and stood by, hoping to get an interview with some of the other political entities, the other political personalities that were there. And the moment that the other media outlet left the area, then the campaign came up immediately and instructed me to leave. That's when I went to the parking lot and started speaking with people directly about their observations and their issues. Many people in the parking lot were confused that there was no specific mention of the governor's race. One person even stated that she felt a little abandoned because she thought the singular linear focus was on the governor's race. Now, you and I both know that you don't fight City Hall, and even if you do win, it's going to cost you a pound of flesh. And the odds of being victorious in that court case to overturn that election are very slim and growing slimmer by the moment. But no specific mention of that left one individual specifically very confused and disappointed, feeling abandoned, their words, not mine. There was no mention of previous affiliated candidate Blake Masters, who just a month and a half ago had indicated strong interest in running for that Senate seat again. And I've noticed many media campaigns have speculated with Lake in the race now and Sheriff Lamb in the race that there's no lane for Blake Masters. He becomes a diffuser in the primary, and without the President Trump endorsement this go around, that's going to be a very difficult challenge for his funding. Some polls I looked at today put the polling with Lake at 42%, Sheriff Lamb at 11%, and Blake Masters at 7%. Now, I know Sheriff Lamb. I interacted with him many times through my career in public safety. I've always found him to be a decent guy with a singular linear focus and a great work ethic. I'm very interested to learn more about his campaign and his platform moving forward. Then there was the atypical vilification of the press, the demonization of the press. And finally having press credentials, I identified as a part of the press, and I was in that gaggle on the riser. I have a journalism degree, I graduated in public relations, and I have a tremendous amount of experience speech writing, teaching, public speaking. And so as that, I have to say that the blanket condemnation of the press left me with a personal bad taste in my mouth. And I heard many people on the riser in the press corps express sentiment that they thought that that was unwarranted and unfair. Full disclosure, I've said before, I was a strong supporter of this candidate during the gubernatorial race. Factually speaking, for one individual in the press corps, we're not the fake news. I've done nothing but issue the most accurate, unbiased, and newsworthy version of what I've observed and experienced and gathered from the street. I heard several people say the same thing, which led me to perform a straw poll, and I looked today at 42 outlets on the internet. And yes, there are some of them that are very harsh, very unfair, mudslinging of themselves, name calling, very unfitting of their profession, and shame on them. I counted 18 outlets. You could interpret their coverage as negative, unflattering pictures, name-calling headlines, misleading headlines, or the king of all things, tombstoning headlines, where you have two separate stories, but when people read across, they see something very unfair. I found 12 to be what I would consider, and where I find myself, newsworthy as being unbiased, very neutral. They gave a factual event, they printed some quotes, and the pictures they printed were complimentary, and they didn't appear to be biased one way or the other. And then I found another 12 that appeared to be positive. So out of the 42 I looked at, 24 could be considered neutral or positive, with 18 negative. I think the tide has changed on the blanket statement of the fake news, and it's time to be more specific and more disciplined with the language. Again, if you talk in facts from the positive and you keep speaking of what you are going to do as an individual, it may not get the sensationalism, the Jerry Springer mudslinging, and it might lose focus on the ad campaigns. But I think a lot of people will respond to that based on what I observed. I did notice there was a lot of the typical cliches. I stopped counting after 57 mentions of the word fight, fighter, or warrior. I think that that's a grotesquely overused word. And again, speaking from the positive, I would not resort to phrases and words that illuminate violence or combat or conflict. You can describe the political ethosphere by talking about doing a good, honest, and straightforward job. Here I speak about the ethics and the principles of Margaret Chase Smith.
Given the opportunity to ask the candidate a question tonight at the gaggle after the announcement, I'm hoping to evoke a sentiment of Margaret Chase Smith, who was once famously quoted saying that in public service it's more than doing an effective and honest job. You must serve all of the people and all of the nation with complete dedication.
The interesting thing that somebody noted in the risers, the limited access to the candidate by the press, is one of the main complaints that the identified conservative press has with the current administration, that they're not allowed to ask Joe Biden questions. The handlers keep him away from the press, and as such, he's shielded. Finally, somebody noticed that there appeared to be a solid delineation between the average voter and what appeared to be the big donors, the mega donors, whatever you want to call them. Judging by the location that was chosen for this event and the presence of the large VIP area, it really felt like there was a distinction to this individual, where he felt that he was instantly demoted to a second-class voter or second-class citizen and no longer part of the elite crowd. It really appeared to him that this was a party for the big donors and to get the machine up and running, and that what was a grassroots, spontaneous organization has now become a polished political machine. And he said, for one, he was very turned off by it. He stated he'd probably still vote for Lake because the platform appears to be solid, but he said this might be the last event that he goes to. Personally, for myself, being a member of the press corps and a previous supporter and voter of the campaign, I drove 6 hours to attend this with the hopes of interacting as a complete journalist and, again, questioning and interacting with the candidate, only to be denied all that. There was a lot of opposing observations that I saw from people in the crowd, people in the press, and it left everybody disjointed. I personally struggled for 24 hours with my approach to this, dealing with my observations and the previous experiences that I'd had. I even debated not posting this video because of that. At the end of the day, I believe in principle-centered political discourse, maximum personal liberty, maximum personal responsibility. And I support candidates who are organic, honest, transparent, available, diplomatic, and diligent to do that. One individual I spoke to described the event last night as stumbling, that the campaign stumbled out of the gate. I don't know if that's the overall sentiment, and my observations won't describe it like that, but I will share one observation personally I had, and that was interacting with the staff. Previously, I had interacted with a lot of staff members, And I know that these are young, energetic, very bright, very intelligent people who have good ethics and good principles. But last night at the event, interacting with a half a dozen people who I've seen at multiple events, I noticed a real absence in joy in their interactions. The stress level was very high, their patience with people was very short, and they seemed harried by the whole event. The joy that they had exuded before was noticeably missing. I really hope that this campaign can continue to embrace those founding ideals that got it off the ground with such a meteoric rise, because it was very honest, it was very transparent, and it was very raw, unpolished. One voter stated he doesn't like the well-refined machine. He wants his politics to be a little rough, so that way he knows that he's not being sold. Like I said, this was a challenging video to produce for a lot of reasons. I hope that I've been fair, unbiased, transparent, and anybody has any comments, please leave them down below and let's have a discussion about that, whether you're pro or negative. Coincidentally, I was right next to Candidate Lake's old media outlet set up on the riser. I told him, reality hits you hard, bro. They didn't know what I was talking about. If you know, you know. Thank you so much for tuning in. Yeti at large.